those of you who don't know us, I'm Claire Snowden-Darling.
I'm Laura Knowles.
Thank you so much for joining us. We are really delighted to be going through this with you. You can sit down to start with.
We do like to sit on the couch.
We do like to sit on the couch. So we've got a couple of things to run through with you. I'm honestly so super excited. Basically, Laura and I discovered the joys of kinesiology around about 2007 for me, about the same time for you, wasn't it? And the second I discovered it, I absolutely knew it was what I was put on the earth to do, and it has basically been the focus of my life ever since. What kinesiology is, let's start there, and then let's move on to what functional kinesiology is, because kinesiology is a very big, all-encompassing world. So we'll start with what is kinesiology. Kinesiology is a very hard word for people to spell. And say, kinesiology. But basically, it was discovered in the 1960s by a chiropractor and doctor. In America, you have to be a doctor before you become a chiropractor, called Dr. George Goodheart, which is a great name. And he discovered through his work that basically he'd get a lot of people coming in with that kind of upper shoulder, crunch. And he would fix them up in chiropractic terms, and then they would go away, but 2 weeks later they would be back. And he was really bothered by the fact that he wasn't fixing people, he was just putting a sticking plaster on things. And so he basically started to look at what was really going on in the body. And he was the first person, it sounds really normal now, but he was the first person to actually identify that where a problem is, it actually isn't, that it's not the root cause of where the problem is. So he then started to look at, well, how can I work with this, kind of shoulder issue? He basically started to discover that when a shoulder, for example, is too tight or too painful, usually the other one's not doing very much. So perversely, we start working, in the opposite places to where we think. And through his work, he then went on to discover, and Laura's going to talk to you more about this because it was one of the big wows for me, that there are, in fact, 42 muscles, 50 muscles
50
in applied kinesiology.
In functional kinesiology as well.
We added more. I love that. There are 50 muscles. We haven't just made them up. These are actually, in textbooks and things that we found. There are 50 muscles in the human body that are connected via nerves into organs. And we then bring in Chinese 5-element theory, and they work on the meridians as well. So we have what we call the muscle-organ meridian connection. The way that we actually sort of deal, how do we work with that is we do something called the theory of muscle testing. Muscle testing is like a whole new language. It is this way of having this incredible dialogue with the body. It is incredibly easy to learn, and it takes time, like any language, to get it absolutely right. So one of the things I always say to people to consider in kinesiology is you can learn how to muscle test. I taught my daughter how to muscle test when she was 6. It's really easy. But it's one of those skills that the more you do it, the more refined it becomes, the more, the easier it becomes.
But it's like learning a language. We can all speak, but to actually be able to communicate takes practice, time and learning.
Exactly. But it really is a dialogue with the body that we are creating. So as I said, Laura's going to talk you more through this, but let's just go back to my phrase, that if there are 50 muscles that are connected via the nervous system to organs, that means, let's give you an example of that, if somebody's got quad issues, which is really common, or hamstring issues, again, very, very common, in kinesiology world, quads are actually linked via the nervous system, via nerves, to the small intestine. So yeah, I could be looking at, there's an issue in your quads from a muscular perspective, but I'm actually more interested in what the digestion's like. Hamstrings are large intestine, so I'm going to be asking people how their bowels are. I'm going to be talking about diet. I'm interested in why do you keep on having this injury, because it's unlikely to just be a structural issue. However, it could be, and I'll talk to you more about that in a moment. So through this muscle testing, we're actually having this conversation of what is going on in this electrical circuit, what is happening. So when we do a muscle test, and we're going to demo that to you in a bit, it's like what we're trying to do is turn on a light switch. So if I test this muscle, it's like I'm flicking on a light switch, and I want to see if the bulb comes on. And if the bulb doesn't come on, then there's a couple of things it could be. In the case of the light switch, it could be the switch, it could be the cable, it could be the fuse, it could be the bulb. So in kinesiology terms, I now want to find out, well, what is it that's actually going on? So this is where we have something called the B's. So what we call 4 realms, the B's. B for biochemical, E for emotional, E for electrical, and S for structural. So that basically equates to my light switch. So the light switch could be biochemical. Is there the right nutrition in this body to fire this muscle? So in the case of the quads, for example, if someone isn't digesting, they might not have the right level of digestive aid. You might find on their own medication, like an omeprazole, or they're taking loads of Gaviscon. This could actually be one of the causes of this quad issue. And equally, they might not have quad issues, they might be coming to you because they've got bloating. It doesn't matter which came first, the chicken or the egg, this circuit is connected. So emotions, a bit like that cable, we could just be, so much anxiety will switch off muscles. It will cause digestive issues for a variety of reasons, not just from what I would like to call the holistic perspective of stress equals illness. We actually know that stress and anxiety stop our ability to make digestive aid because it stimulates the sympathetic nervous system. There is all this amazing science now behind why these things happen when we have this emotional issue. Electrically is an interesting one because we can then start to bring in all of the things like, if you're really into the alternative and the holistic models, this is where our meridians and the acupuncture meridians come in. This is where, you can start talking about chakras or energy work. And from more of the scientific perspective, our body's run by electricity. Our muscles fire by electricity. So we need our electrical systems to be working effectively for full health in the body. And then coming on to the 4th, that would be our structural. So this would be, well, I've actually got a tear in the muscle, or I've got nerve damage, or my posture's so out of alignment that now I'm always going to have this kind of impingement in my bowel. So I'm always going to have this quad issue. So this is where we start to look at a bit of everything. So what's beautiful about being a kinesiologist, and one of the things that really got me interested in it, I trained originally as an energy healer, and I'd done some massage, but the bit that got me about kinesiology was everything can come into it. So where it's beautiful from the perspective of being an existing practitioner, everything you do will slot so beautifully into the kinesiology umbrella. And what kinesiology offers you is the opportunity to just dive deeper into people's issues. So, why is that constantly happening? Okay, let's do some muscle testing. So when we find a muscle that is imbalanced and not working effectively, what we then do is we have a toolkit of techniques, so biochemical, emotional, electrical, and structural, to fix up that electrical circuit. So we work on the lymph, we work on the meridians, we start to talk about foods that could be causing this circuit and imbalance. We eventually, we do food sensitivity testing, which we're going to show you in a bit. And then eventually, anyone wanting to go on to study the practitioner level of functional kinesiology, we then start adding in supplementation. So you're actually muscle testing for the correct supplementation. So it's not guesswork. And so for me, and I can speak for you because I know it's true for you, Laura had studied nutrition first. It was it's just guesswork. It's educated guesswork, but it's guesswork. Or we use really, really expensive testing processes, lab testing in nutrition, that actually kinesiology takes the guesswork out of it. And so it's just mind-blowing. And often, and this is where ironically functional kinesiology was born, often what the body is trying to tell you is so far removed from any educated guesswork that we could come up with that it's illuminating. It's just absolutely illuminating. So let's tell you a little bit about functional kinesiology, and then I will pass you over to Laura. Functional kinesiology was born out of the fact that there are There are loads of different kinesiologies. There are some that focus very, very much on the electrical, some that focus very, very much on the structural, some that focus on the emotional, some that are a bit of everything. But it is not a stretch of the imagination to say that none of them are now geared up for what we are seeing coming into clinic. We have, in the last 20 years, the amount of autoimmune disease has gone through the roof. Menopause wasn't talked about even 5 years ago. And the reason that hormones are in such a pickle is because women are adrenalized, they're stressed. This is not how women were 20 years ago. The state of the human body, every other person now has cancer. The autoimmune disease has gone from 80 recognized in autoimmune diseases to over 300 in 30 years. People coming in now to clinic don't tend to just be a bit of IBS and headaches. They are coming in with a list like this of issues and an emotional, trauma used to be something that very rarely people experience. How many people are traumatized now? Because it's traumatic trying to deal with what's going on in the outside world. And so my experience of teaching to the highest levels for other colleges and for a variety of different kinesiologies, which is also Laura's teaching experience, was we just weren't gearing people up for what's actually coming into clinical practice. And it wasn't representative of what is coming in. And so what happened with functional kinesiology, and I'm going to be honest, put my hands up, it was because of my own health journey that I was doing everything right. I was eating the way I'd been told to eat, and I was taking the supplements I'd been told to take. And they were testing. It was all, legitimately in line with what my practitioners were saying and doing. But it wasn't cracking it. It wasn't fixing the issue. And basically, well, it was actually a complete epiphany that I had on Byron Bay Beach, where I realized that there is this very interconnected way that hormones work that isn't being talked about. And actually, if I'm really honest, as a kinesiologist, someone would come in with a bowel issue and I'd be looking at the bowels. Well, that's exactly how the medical model works. And we know that that doesn't actually work for a lot of people. So the holistic therapy has started to treat symptoms with holistic methods, but either way, I think for a lot of, I've trained in 16 disciplines, and I know that for all of them, ultimately we were trying to deal with the issue, as opposed to looking incredibly deeply at someone's health history and actually starting to call out some of the foundational things, these things that we think are only a little tweak that have these massive ramifications to people's health. So really calling out food intolerances. The research that Laura and I have done on food intolerances is incredibly up to date, and I don't know anyone else talking about the hierarchy of food intolerances that we talk about and teach. People weren't making the connections with how blood sugars, can cause, or stress can affect our blood sugars. Both of those things will have a knock-on effect with female hormones. So functional kinesiology was born out of this real desire to actually be able to have an effect on helping people to get their health back through hormonal wellness. And it started because the first protocol that Laura and I had put together was for irritable bowel syndrome, and we actually worked with a gastroenterologist. And it was this illuminating thing one day when he went, well, the reason you've got nothing to fix irritable bowel syndrome is because it's not actually a bowel issue, it's a hormone imbalance. And it was one of those aha moments, okay. And that sent us down the rabbit hole. And as soon as we then realized immune conditions start with a hormone imbalance, start with blood sugar imbalances, this whole piece of work then completely opens up. So that's functional kinesiology as a practitioner course. But what we then realized was that we wanted to be able to offer the foundation of this work to practitioners who maybe have nutrition, any kind of muscular work, emotional work, anything. We wanted to be offer the basics of this work, the hormones, the organ connection with the muscles, the food sensitivity testing, understanding about the hierarchy of food intolerances. We wanted to be able to offer this because even on its own, it is an absolute game changer for people. I mean, I opened my practice on a foundation course. It changes people's lives. And we needed to have our own foundation course to be able to know that our practitioners were learning the right things to move them on to the hormones work. That's functional kinesiology, that's kinesiology, and that's the bees and kind of the essence of why it's great in clinical practice.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about how these 50 muscles that Claire is talking about, how we work with them. So as Claire has explained, kinesiology was born out of traditional Chinese medicine, and they work with the 14 meridians, and that is the brain, which is the spine, stomach, spleen, heart, small intestine, let's see if I get my word in the right order now, bladder, kidney, circulation sex, which is our sex hormones, triple warmer, which is our endocrine, gallbladder, liver, large intestine, and lung. So all of these muscles sit on some. Thank you very much. All of these muscles, I've been teaching it for a while, all of these muscles sit on this wheel, and the Chinese, it is genius how all of these 14 meridians connect together and work together. And one of the wonderful things that we do, like Claire explained, the traditional medical model, if you've got a knee problem, they will look at the knee. Whereas the toolkit that we have, because you have these 14 meridians, you are able to see the body truly holistically. So you are able to have that communication with the stomach, with the small intestine, with the liver, with the hormones, with the lungs. And then you can get this picture, this real understanding of, okay, so they may have a knee problem, or say they may be getting headaches, but where is that coming from? So kinesiology reveals a picture for you, the practitioner, for you to be able to have that conversation. And what is beautiful about Chinese medicine is that it doesn't just look at the physical ailments that happen in the body. The Chinese way of looking at a person, they're also taking into account what is the emotions that are going on, what are the colours, what are the seasons, what are the tastes, what are the smells. We look at all of this when we're looking at someone's health, and that can be truly fascinating. For example, the emotion that sits in the large intestine is grief, regret, and guilt. And so having this information, say the large intestine came up as something to work on, we can have that conversation with our client and say, okay, the large intestine has tested, it's muscle tested, and the emotions are guilt, regret, and grief. Have you experienced this? Are you struggling with any of this? And then we have emotional techniques that can help support that person to release those emotions or process those emotions, which is going to support the large intestine. I think this is what is truly fascinating about what we do, is this holistic perspective. The next thing I wanted to explore was posture. And this gets really fun when you start to understand the muscles in the body that are connected into organs. You can watch someone walk and you can see what is going on with their body.
It's literally what my favourite thing to do. You see someone walking down the road and you go, they don't poo.
No.
They don't poo.
Because they will be turning their feet in. Because we know that this muscle, the fascia lata at the top of the hip, is connected in by the nervous system into the bowel. So if the bowel isn't functioning properly, this muscle will, there'll be two things that will happen. It will either switch off, which will mean that other muscles in that area have to do the job, or it will get too tight, which also means that the other muscles around that muscle are going to have to do more work. But you can see that the posture, if that muscle is no longer working, the feet turn in. And this is wonderful as a practitioner when a client walks in and you can see a lot of the neck muscles, for example, are connected to the stomach. So if someone comes in with this kind of posture and you can see the muscles are strained in the neck, you're going to be thinking, I need to be working on the stomach.
And then the health history form says, I get indigestion and reflux. You're like, I know, I could see it.
Yeah.
I could see it in your neck.
So that's posture. We wanted to show you some demonstrations.
We do.
What is muscle testing? We're going to do some of the different muscles that are connected into different organs, so you get this understanding of where is what. And then we're going to do a bit of food testing.
We are going to do it with food testing.
You want to test me?
You can test me. Hop on.
Welcome to
And then
my
I can
clinic.
test you for food testing if you like.
Yes, that would be marvellous. Yes. I'll take that, please. Thank you very much.
Red socks on. That's not very brand, is it?
Okay, so we're going to start with the basic muscle test. And as Claire said, learning to muscle test, actually teaching muscle testing is incredibly simple, but it takes practice to be able to get good at it. Because every body is different. Every muscle is different, and it's about listening to the body, about what it is it's trying to communicate. Now, one of the first muscles that we learn is the supraspinatus, which is on the central meridian, and it's for the brain. And we need to get this muscle working because we need to have the brain functioning if we're going to get a good reading with our muscle testing. Now, this muscle, the supraspinatus, is here. It's on the top of the shoulder. Supra means on top of, and spinatus means shoulder blade. And it's why people who have a lot of brain stress tend to get that tight shoulders, and they'll have hunched shoulders like that. It's very common. And so working on this muscle, for someone, working on it for everyone's important, but working on someone who is particularly stressed can be very, very relieving. The muscle test for the supraspinatus, we bring the arm out to the side. It's a nice, easy one to test. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take hold of Claire's arm, and I'm going to ask her to meet my pressure, meet my resistance. And that muscle connection, she's not fighting against me. I always say to my clients, if anything is painful or too much of a resistance, then let it go, because that is giving me information, that is telling me that there's something that is imbalanced in that muscle. So I'm going to ask Claire to hold in this position. I'm going to show her the range of motion. I'm going to come into the pubic bone, and I want her to hold it. So, hold. I'm going to give it a moment to engage, and then I'm going to apply pressure. And you can see that that muscle is unlocking. I'm going to do it on both sides of the body and hold, and both sides are unlocking. So this is where I would be using my toolkit. Like I said, it is the structural, the electrical, the nutritional and the emotional. That's our toolkit. And we use NeuroLymphatic Points, which are, we massage lymph around the body. It can be quite painful, but it's incredibly relieving. And one of the things that I am particularly passionate about in my clinic is that a client leaves feeling change has happened, feeling different, feeling like they are brighter and can see clearer. And so a strong massage technique is recommended with a functional kinesiologist. So I'm going to do that first of all in very specific locations. Yes. So this is a NeuroLymphatic point for the supraspinatus for the brain. And it was on both sides, so I'm also going to do a spine plane.
So this would be switched off because someone hasn't drunk enough water, which is probably this morning. A bit busy. Or they've been hunched over a computer, or driving a lot, or not slept very well, or just been quite stressed and busy and thinking, and anything like that, or they've suffered with headaches. So if someone suffered with headaches, is absolutely, that's right. The muscle
Work with permission.
yeah, okay, for you, it is absolutely okay. So what you tend to find with these points is they're really painful and they just clear. That's what we are looking for. So that's quite sharp, 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 and clearing.
Lovely. So I've rubbed my NeuroLymphatics. I'm going to run the meridian. So an acupuncturist would be using needles in this respect, but we just use the power of touch to be able to balance the meridian system. And this starts on the pubic bone to the chin, and we are going to run this meridian a few times to get the energy balanced for this muscle. And then I'm going to hold neurovascular points for the supraspinatus, and this is encouraging more blood to the muscle and to the brain. And these again are in specific places. So we'll just hold that for a little bit. And then I'm going to come back to my, how was that?
Lovely side, thank you.
I am going to retest the muscle and see if I have made a change, if I have locked that muscle. So hold here. Lovely. I now have a locking muscle on both sides. Wonderful. So that is the basic muscle test. I'll show you a couple more just so that you can see an example of a leg muscle. And what else could we do? We could do the abs. The abs. So I'm going to show you the quadriceps for the small intestine. And this is a leg muscle, this big set of muscles that are here. And I'm going to again ask Claire to hold in this position, and I'm going to apply pressure down to the bed. And hold. It's going up. And hold. That one is locking. So that is giving me information about the quadriceps. Maybe she had some knee pain. And it's also giving me information about the small intestine, that that muscle is unlocking. And so I would be using supplements to, I'll show you an experience of so to test supplements as a kinesiologist, I'm going to bring the supplement next to the parotid gland, which is where we produce our saliva. And so the body recognizes that this is now in the circuit, and it is recognizing that that is supporting the body. Is that going to help? So I'm going to bring this up to Claire's parotid gland, and I'm going to retest that muscle. This one. And hold. And you can now see that that
effortless. It's like a different muscle.
I know which digestive enzyme.
Yes, that was a cheat because it's I've been on the same digestive enzyme.
But it's lovely to be able to see how we use supplementation.
I have one.
Yes.
I'm never on time. So you can see the difference, like when it doesn't work.
So I've got a different digestive enzyme coming in here, and I'm going to test that muscle again. Is this going to help?
No,
I know it doesn't.
So one of the things people always say is you're not pressing as hard, or you're pressing harder. Actually, my experience as a kinesiologist, and I'll show you when I'm doing some food testing on Laura, is when the muscle can't hold, I mean, you can literally knock it over with a feather. You can literally knock it down with 2 fingers. When it's holding, I have to really engage, like they're meeting my pressure. So the converse is actually true. When someone's muscle is locking, I have to do more work than when it's unlocking. So when you start to see those kind of responses to nutrition, it is a wow, not just for me as a practitioner, it's a wow for the people on the bed where they go, especially when there was pain, oh, that would really hurt, it's gone. Or people with neck problems when they're like, I can't even turn my neck. And you find the right digestive aid and they're like, oh, and then you take it away and they're like, I can't turn my neck. It is literally mind-blowing.
Wonderful. We can do some food testing,
yes,
and also show how motion switch the body on.
Yes, so that's basic muscle testing, which Laura's shown you a couple of circuits. And so you can imagine if someone's coming in and they've got constant ankle pain, and you're able to really dive into the muscles and what's going on. Is it nutritional? Is it those things? And how do I fix it? So moving on to food testing. Food testing is, again, this huge wow. And it's always taught in kinesiology, but I don't think that enough is made of it, because I truly, truly, truly believe, after all my years in clinical practice and creating functional kinesiology, blood sugar instability is, I'm going to go so far as to say, one of the main causes of chronic health issues. The connection with stress, all of that stuff, it's only really now being talked about so much with quite a few of the people right on the forefront of the nutritional science community. We're quite excited because they're now, they're backing on our work, basically. But it's so key. When we eat food that we're intolerant to, basically what happens is we have to dump a load of adrenaline and cortisol into our system because we have a fight or flight response. So if you're eating something you're intolerant to 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day, which can definitely happen with things like wheat or milk, your body is going through this internal battle. We dump a load of cortisol into the system, spikes our blood sugars, we then have to produce insulin, drops our blood sugars down, we get cortisol response because our blood sugars are low. We end up in this huge roller coaster. So food intolerance is huge in making sure people get well, and that's why it's taught on foundation, because just by tweaking someone's diet to remove the foods they're intolerant to will have a huge impact on their wellness moving forwards. So the way that we do that is actually the opposite of what Laura's just done. I'm going to find a muscle, so holding out, that's switching off and holding out, that's switching off. So I'm just going to do the quick balancing that Laura just did, because I actually want that nice and locking. How are we doing? Oh, that's why I kinesiology pays. So I'm just whizzing through these NeuroLymphatics that she wrote. So what I want to say is, in kinesiology we learn quite a lot, but there is a lot of repetition. We're going to talk you through how the course works in a moment. There's a lot of repetition. It's very, very fun. You are working on people. They are working on you. So the beauty is, like with a lot of alternative therapies, you're going to get worked on during the course, which is just so fantastic. But a lot of repetition. There is a whole on all of the lectures are as videos online. So you can go over it and over it and over it. So yes, there is quite a bit of information. Once you've got the basics, once you know, okay, I need to know the lymph, I need to know the vascular and meridian, it's fine. It's fine. So let's see. Lovely, we're now locking. Can you see that? Great. So what we do with food sensitivity testing, grab my handy food sensitivity testing kit. So we have actually put together food sensitivity testing kits of the main allergens that we see. I'm going to start with, okay, I'm not going to tell Laura. I'm going to test a few and then I'm going to tell you what they are. So, in the clinic, it's a good start. I'll do a few because they are illuminating. Okay, so what I'm looking for is, we know that this muscle is lovely and responsive, it's locking. If I bring in food that doesn't switch the muscle off, then at a basic level, that's fine. We do teach you other tests, but I just want to do a real visual, basic visual, just so that you can see, because what I really want to show you is the food we're intolerant to. So I'm going to bring in some food. Again, I'm popping it by her parotid gland. Provided that it's in plastic or glass, the brain can read through it, it's inert, and it's not in metal which blocks it. So let's try this, holding out. That's not switching her off. Like I said, in practice, there are another couple of tests we run, but just so that you've got the visual, that's not switching her off. So that is fine. Let's try something else. Here we go. Ah, can you see how that just literally, nothing there. One finger, gone. Holding out, take that away, really strong again. Bam, amazing, absolutely amazing. Do a couple more. Holding out. Ah, that's interesting. So that would be curious to see whether or not that was with the other tests that we do. Then let's do one more. Holding out. Literally, it's like she's even got a muscle.
It feels so hard to hold out.
Amazing, amazing. Even holding it out feels hard. So what was interesting was Laura was absolutely okay with rice, plain white rice, and goat's milk. She was not okay with potato starch and wheat grains. Now, what's interesting is, of course, wheat and potatoes can be in people's diet. These are so common. These are so common. These are some of the most common allergens. People can be eating those all day, every day. And so having that, because that gluten-free bread is often made with potato starch. And so by having those in her diet, by eliminating those, can you imagine how much better she suddenly, but can you imagine if she did, how much better she would feel? It's that simple. It's that simple. So that's a basic idea of food sensitivity testing. Now, I'm not going to go into it, but you also learn how to work out what foods are good for you, which is also really, really exciting. Not just, yeah, they'll do, the ones that are absolutely cacao for your health. And it's so individual. We call it biochemic individuality. It's so individual. And literally one man's meat is another man's poison. So we've done food testing just to give you an idea of how emotions turn off a muscle as well. So we've got our nice locking muscle. So I'm just going to ask Laura to think of a really stressful situation. Now, once I've got to know her, I might know some of her emotional issues, and I might actually just say, think about the pandemic, think about the divorce of your parents when you were 6, my parents didn't divorce when she was 6, but you know, for reference. Think about those things. So we're actually saying it out loud. I could just say to her, think about something that's really stressing you out. And then that's switching off. And when we know that an emotion is switching off a client, we can then apply tools. So in Practitioner, we work with the batch flower remedies, which are lovely. We also have a variety of emotional techniques. In Foundation, we do something called emotional stress release, which is the easiest technique, but an absolute game changer. We also do sort of rewriting historic issues. We do future projections, so anything that people have got anxiety about. Some really, really lovely emotional tools to get people actually in this whole functioning place.
And then in holding space, which is part of Practitioner.
Oh yeah, so yeah, in holding space, which is part of Practitioner, we dive very, very deeply in how to hold space, how to deal with traumas, when to refer on, a massive amount of tools, inner child work, real transformation, work on massive emotional transformation. So I think that's all of those things. Should we talk about how the course works?
Yes. So the course pathway, you start with Foundation, which is 6 weekends, 1 weekend a month. And that is teaching the basics of the food testing, the 50 muscle tests, the basic emotional tests, understanding the Chinese meridian wheel, understanding traditional Chinese medicine from the 5-element perspective, and being able to conduct a basic balance with members of the public.
So just to give you an overview of what that would look like, that means that someone could come in having never had kinesiology. You could do what we call a 14 muscle wheel balance, get a real overview of what's going on in their body, find out what's not switching on, what is switching on, what the body's priority is to work on, because that's always really interesting. Someone's got blood, you know, they've got diabetes, but you can't, it's just not their blood sugars, you find out it's their liver, and then that's like, oh, that's so fascinating, especially when you find out why. And also you're applying the corrections to that. You will then also be able to do the food sensitivity testing, and not just do this 14, you know, by rote, just do the 14. You can hone in. Someone's got a bad knee. That's great. You know, quads, hamstring, fascia lata, adductors, gracilis. You're learning all these muscles. So you can do a very, very localized balance on specific issues, on digestion, on emotions. You can really tailor it. So very, very keen to teach students is how to use kinesiology creatively. So you learn all of that in the 5 weekends. 6. Well, it's 6 weekends. So you learn for 5, and then the 6th is like a consolidation, so you don't learn anything else, and you have a very lovely assessment.
Yes, the assessment is to do a case study on a member of the public, and you also get a multiple choice quiz to fill out so that our assessor can see that you understand kinesiology. The Foundation training is supported with an online portal where all of the lectures are available online, as well as quizzes to help you learn and digest the information. There is a homework book where you will be doing your case studies, and you'll get feedback from the teacher about how to improve your case studies. And so that is Foundation.
Yes, and just to say that all of the courses we offer are insured by Valens, and they are accredited by 2 different governing bodies. and all up to national occupational standards, CNHC recognised, etc., etc., etc.
So then if you fall in love with kinesiology and you want to continue your journey into practitioner, this is where the real excitement happens, because this is where we get deep into hormones. And this is the basis of the work of the triangle of hormonal health, which is looking at this interplay between blood sugars, adrenals, and sex hormones, and how this has a knock-on effect with the digestion and the immune system. We also do the holding space module, which is taking you deep into the emotional techniques, but also your own emotional journey. The practitioner training is 9 weekends, and we cover the big subjects. There's an introduction weekend, holding space, blood sugars, adrenals, hormones, digestion, immune system, consolidation, and your assessment. And the assessment mirrors that of the foundation, where you do a case study on a member of the public and you have a written paper exam.
And just to say about the practitioner course, whilst we're working on the hormones, it's everything that goes with it. It's specific diets for blood sugars, for women going through, you know, hormonal imbalances, the specific diet for microbiome reset, because digestion, we go into microbiome, we go into SIBO, irritable bowel syndrome, all the sexy stuff. Immune, we talk about the differences with what's going on in the immune system in cancer. We're in no way saying that we treat cancer. We're saying let's understand what's happening in the immune system with cancer and autoimmune disease. Like, what's the difference? It's all very mystifying until you actually find out that it's not that mystifying. And actually, we don't even have to deal with the immune system. We deal with the blood sugars, we deal with the stress, we deal with the lifestyle changes. So it encompasses this whole health approach to living, and it really demystifies. That's the key. It demystifies so many things that are going on in people's bodies, in society, the beliefs in the health industry. It demystifies everything.
And if you decide that you want to be a kinesiology professional, which is recognised by the CNHC, which is the organisation run by the government, which is connected with the NHS, so doctors are able to refer to kinesiology professionals, then that is your foundation training, practitioner training, a nutrition qualification that we offer, which is Nutrition for Health, which is an online course, some kind of coaching qualification or counselling qualification, anatomy and physiology, and a practice management, which is a clinical practice, which is running your business in a professional way.
And some of those you might already have from existing qualifications, so that's taken into consideration. But also, you have got 3 years if you want to be a professional kinesiologist to do all of it. There is no rush. There is no rush. You've got a lot of time. You've got a lot of support. So, I think for foundation, we have the most beautiful manuals. Actually, we're in one. They're absolutely beautiful. Oh, we're so proud of them. You have the online portal. You have an online community, not Facebook. A lot of people don't like Facebook. So we have an online community on Mighty Networks where you have got access to teachers, you've got access to the other students. You can organise, practice weekends. You are incredibly, incredibly supported. For your information, the faculty of teachers meets monthly. So we are dealing with anything that is an issue, something you want to flag. We are absolutely behind the scenes working on supporting our students and moving the courses forward all the time. It's something we're really, really passionate about, is that we are responsive. So we have a foundation course starting in February. We would love for you to be on the foundation course. Actually, I better stop this now then.
Yes.